Founded in 2014, the Extraordinary Achievers' vision is to empower others to be the best version of themselves. The show is hosted by Chief Lady Waynette Peters, a multi-entrepreneur, empowerment speaker, confidence mentor, positive lifestyle coach, humanitarian ambassador, and a TV host. Lady Waynette is a holder of over 35 international awards for her humanitarian, philanthropic, and international empowerment contributions and holds 2 chieftaincy titles. Welcome to the Extraordinary Achievers Show.
For real-life stories broadcasted live on air, to please subscribe to our newsletter from our website. We will be honored if you could please like and follow our Facebook pages. Stay in touch and tune in by subscribing to our YouTube channel. Thank you for following us on our Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Tumblr, and TikTok. We are live every Wednesday at 8 p.m. GMT. Please do share with others.
Thank you for joining us to another episode of the Extraordinary Achievers Show, where we're covering community affairs and interests. YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and from our website viewers, we would like to say thank you for joining us. We would like to take this opportunity to thank the various admins of the several Facebook pages that we are aired live, and especially to you that has shared this program. We also take this opportunity to thank our head of media, King Darren, and his team, Prince Jordan and Adian, our quality check officer, Heather, our admin team, Melissa and Vicky, our graphics team, Anna and Jao, and our Princess Kay. For every share that has been made on social media and all virtual communication tools, I am grateful. We at the Extraordinary Achievers Show, we super appreciate your time. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for liking. Thank you for commenting. And thank you for taking part in tonight's show. What is the difference between immunization and vaccination? That's a question that I was asking myself the other day. So I went on to good old Google and I asked Google, and Google said, vaccination is the act of introducing a vaccine into the body to produce immunity to a specific disease. It then said, immunization is a process by which a person becomes protected against a disease through vaccination. This term is often used interchangeably with vaccination or inoculation. So I say, thank you, Google. I have learned the specifics in a short 2 seconds, and I'm grateful for that too. Our topic today is life after vaccinations, and how much do we really know about vaccinations? Joining us, we have Professor Rotimi Jaiyesimi, who is a medical specialist, and we welcome you on the Extraordinary Achievers Show.
Yeah, good evening, and thank you for having me on your show. I look forward to an exciting evening. Thank you.
Thank you. We also would like to welcome Dr. Vita Khaki from the US of A. Biochemistry and molecular biology is her specialty, and we welcome you on the Extraordinary Achievers Show.
Thank you for having me, Lady Waynette.
Thank you. We also would like to welcome Professor Edward Kunonga, who is a public health consultant. Professor, good evening.
Good evening, and thank you very much for having me on the show. Look forward to an evening of discussion, engagement, and hopefully sharing information.
We thank you for your time. Also joining us is Miss Juliana Ansah, who's a healthcare specialist. And we would like to say welcome, Juliana, to the show.
Hi, thank you. I'm pleased to be here and look forward to hearing from the other speakers as well.
Thank you. And we thank you for your time. We would like to encourage you to follow, subscribe to our YouTube channel. We also have a Twitter, Instagram, and a LinkedIn account. We will be delighted to connect with you.
For real-life stories broadcasted live on air, to please subscribe to our newsletter from our website. We will be honored if you could please like and follow our Facebook pages. Stay in touch and tune in by subscribing to our YouTube channel. Thank you for following us on our Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Tumblr, and TikTok. We are live every Wednesday at 8 p.m. GMT. Please do share with others.
We would like to welcome you again onto the Extraordinary Achievers Show. And as we said earlier, today we are looking at vaccines. How much do we really know about vaccines? And what is life after vaccines going to be for us? And we would like to learn from the professors that join us and from the medical doctor and also from the healthcare specialist that joins us this evening. If you would like to take time to share this program with someone else, we super appreciate you for doing so. We would like to introduce you first to Professor Edward Kunonga, a public health consultant. Professor Edward is a passionate public health professional with knowledge and experience and expertise on improving population health and healthcare quality at a local, regional, and national and global level. He has an extensive public health experience, including working as a joint director of public health for 2 urban district health authorities in the UK. Dr. Professor is a consultant in public health, epidemiologist, and a healthcare quality expert for the Northeast region of England and is a freelance public health consultant. He is also a board-certified lifestyle medicine specialist. He is committed to and passionate about improving population health and outcomes and quality of life through prevention, early intervention, and equitable access to healthcare. He has a specialist interest in the public policy and its impact on population, health outcomes, applied health economics, communicable and non-communicable disease prevention and control, a healthcare quality and addressing inequities in health outcomes gained from working in different settings. He has a very strong interest in academia, teaching, research, and is an honorary professor at Teesside University. And once again, we welcome you on the Extraordinary Achievers Show.
Thank you for having me, and delighted to be here to really have a conversation about vaccinations and especially the COVID-19 vaccine. One of my friends the other day said to me, you know, the widespread impact of COVID-19 means that you are either infected or you are affected. I don't think there's anyone who will say they've escaped this one. So great to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you. Professor, the first question to you today is, do vaccinations alter our DNA?
So that's a great question. And maybe one of the things to start off by saying is this pandemic has led to so much interest in terms of the infection itself, possible treatments, and lately the vaccine. We know that as well as fighting the pandemic, we are also fighting an infodemic, which is the lots and lots of information, some of it from sources that are not credible. And thankfully, there is credible sources of information. So the question regarding whether vaccines alter our DNA is perhaps driven by people's misunderstanding of the biology, the human biology, but also how vaccines work. At the moment, we've got different types of vaccines. We've got vaccines that are messenger RNA vaccines. The popular ones or the licensed ones are the Pfizer and the Moderna, but we also have other vaccines that work in different ways. So we've got vaccines that are vector vaccines, such as the Oxford AstraZeneca and the Johnson & Johnson attenuated vaccines, and the very popular ones of those is the Sinopharm vaccine. So all of those vaccines have got one main objective, which is exposing your body to either part of what the coronavirus looks like, so your body responds without causing disease, and then ultimately your body creates a memory, which means when you're exposed to the real infection, then you mount a successful response. So that's the underlying principles of how vaccines work. They do that in different ways. The messenger RNA vaccines send a message for the production of spike proteins, and then your inactivated vaccines are basically the virus weakened so that it can never cause infection. Vaccines never alter your DNA, all including the messenger RNA vaccines, which use genetic material or genetic coding to help your body to produce that synthetic protein. So I'd encourage people to go back and look at the basics of biology, which will tell you that the process of protein production happens outside of the nucleus, which is where the DNA resides. And there's no way of getting into the nucleus and altering the DNA. So the short answer is vaccines do not alter our DNA, because it definitely cannot happen. There's nothing that you can use to explain how the DNA ends up being altered by the process of vaccination.
Thank you. So vaccinations do not alter our DNA. We thank you for that. If you've heard it at home, you've heard it from Professor Edward. Says vaccines do not alter our DNA. We would like to welcome you to the Extraordinary Achievers Show, and we would like to acknowledge some of your comments there and acknowledge you as you join us today. If you just joined us, welcome. We have professors, doctors, and a healthcare specialist here to answer some of your questions. Podcaster Norma, good evening to you. We acknowledge you today. Bangi, good evening to you and great to see you again. And Pastor Liz, good evening to you and thank you for joining us. And Pastor Liz says, can't wait. I'm expecting tonight. Awesome topic. And we know that you're from the medical field, so this is up your alleyway. And our administrator, Vicky, we would like to say good evening to you. And Vicky says good evening to all our guests today. Patrick T says, hey, everybody. Don't know if the comments are going to get as lively as last week, but who knows? And Patrick, we look forward to your comments and we look forward to more comments from everyone else. And Angela McCartan, good evening, honey, and thank you for joining us today. And Jake, thank you very much for joining us today. Again, we welcome you. Kelsey, good evening to you too. And Tani, good evening to you. She says good evening to everyone. And Phil Richard, hey, long time no see, my Scrabble mate. Oh, I'll catch you on Scrabble. Good evening, he says, and he's looking forward to a great show, debate and answers. And you're forbidding to say anything about Scrabble in that comment box. And Kennedy says, good evening. And we say good evening to you, Kennedy. And Esquire Charles Lawson says, thank you for your information. And we thank you for joining. And we thank you for being a great supporter for this show. And if you're hungry and you are in Southeast London, FC restaurant that is next to New Cross Gate, Esquire Charles Lawson will make sure that your appetite is quenched. Melissa, good evening to you and thank you for doing an amazing job and being part of the Extraordinary Achievers. We would like to acknowledge you from YouTube, from Facebook, from Twitter, from LinkedIn, from wherever you're tuning in from. We welcome you today. We would like to welcome Professor Rotimi onto our screens as we ask him our next question. Professor, once again, good evening again.
Good evening.
Professor, how effectively have vaccines worked in the past? What is the history of vaccines and how well they have been produced and they have functioned and have been to the satisfaction of what they have been produced for?
Thank you for that question. The history of vaccines go back about 100 years. Human beings have been at the forefront of looking for vaccines to fight various diseases, such as polio, diphtheria, whooping cough, malaria, and smallpox. We have been successful in a number of quests for a vaccine. And as Professor Edward has told you, there are different types of vaccine. Because of vaccines, the development of vaccines, we've been able to eradicate smallpox and polio from the world, and that shows how effective vaccines can be in fighting disease. Like I said, it's been around for 100 years, but one of the issues at the moment, the topical issue, is that it's taken us less than 12 years to develop the COVID-19 vaccine, whereas we are still trying to find a vaccine for HIV. Yes, there is a vaccine for malaria in the offing. It hasn't gone into public use, but they are effective. And with COVID and the COVID vaccine, we have seen the positive effect the vaccination program has had. The COVID vaccine has resulted in fewer hospital admissions, fewer severity of the disease, and it has really done, I mean, the number of cases that we do have in the United Kingdom, for example, has gone very, very low to very small numbers, and very few people are dying. What we would say at the moment is that every death is regrettable, and that is why we're talking today to talk about the vaccines, the importance of having the vaccine, the importance of taking the vaccine when offered. Yes, there is infodemic. There's a lot of misconception about the vaccine, and I'm sure we will address that topic today. So that is what I'll say for now, that vaccines are effective. It's God has given human beings the knowledge to develop these things. I did mention the rapidity at which we were able to develop the COVID vaccine. The reason why this is so, I mean, this is one of the things that worry people, is that there must be some nefarious activity behind it. How could we do it within 12 months? Now, what happened is you had collaboration. Because this was a pandemic affecting virtually every country in the world, politicians, policymakers, the pharmaceutical industry had to come together, put their differences aside, put competition aside, and work together to develop this vaccine. Governments put in money, they funded it. Regulatory bottlenecks. It could take 2 to 3 years after a study to get a license to use the product. But the bureaucratic bottlenecks were also done away with, and we had emergency use authorization. We did not cut corners. All the vaccines have gone through the normal clinical trial phases, and they have been shown to be effective and safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Rotimi. If you've just joined us, welcome to the Extraordinary Achievers. We just heard from Professor Rotimi, and he was answering the question, How effectively have vaccines been working in the past, and what do we know about them? Just before that, we heard from Professor Edward, and we were asked him the question, does vaccination, do they alter our DNA? We are now going to welcome Juliana onto our screens with our first question to her. Juliana, welcome again onto the Extraordinary Achievers Show.
Thank you. I'm very pleased to be here.
Thank you, and we are delighted to have you here. Juliana is the CEO and the founder of blackleaders.org.uk. And Juliana, we want to ask you this question. Can you tell us, can we trust the system?
A great question. I work for the system, but I'm also part of a community that's asking that same question. We know from the past that with any type of interaction with our communities and Western healthcare, we've never really been well informed in the past. There have been tests performed on people in the Black community without the right type of information, such as the Tuscagees, where 600 men were infected with syphilis. No one knew about it. They all felt that they were in a program and they would be treated, but none of that happened. They were observed until they died, and a lot of their family didn't know about that. There are historical events that prevent our communities from trusting the system, but then rightly said, there are facts. There are facts, smallpox and a few other viruses that have been eradicated due to vaccinations, and it's been a global effort rather than the effort of the West for the West. We do know there's a lot of trials and a lot of research still going into malaria and issues such as that. And I know Professor Rotimi has rightly said before that malaria is a problem in Africa. So instead of looking for the West to heal it, Africans should be at the forefront of finding those type of results. So when it comes to us trusting the system, it is very complex. There are a lot of concerns regarding the education of our community. As we know with everything, one size does not fit all. Some people like to learn in a practical sense. Some people learn by reading, and you've got all of that, but then you also have the cultural qualities that make it different and the experience. So I feel that we should be very vigilant. We should look at the facts. There's a very big difference between the scientific and medical elements of the vaccination compared to any political agenda by any country. And so our community does need to educate ourselves on the science of the vaccination, how it works, how different types of vaccinations has worked for across time in different communities, different countries for different viruses. I guess one of the key facts I'd like to say, or key points really, is that it is very much incumbent on us to educate ourselves and spread true information. We are in a time where a lot of false conspiracies are being shared, and a lot of things can make sense when you see it straight away, but definitely to stay well informed yourself.
So stay well informed. We are listening to Juliana Ansah. She's a healthcare specialist. Black culture and Western medicine is their logo. Juliana Ansah, healthcare improvement and change management specialist, is the director of Black Leaders in Healthcare, a community determined in reducing healthcare inequalities. And we thank you, and we will join you back onto our screens shortly. We are going to take a moment to introduce Dr. Vita. Dr. Vita is a holistic menstrual coach who helps women with irregular periods, infertility, PCOS, fibroids, and other hormonal issues restore their productive imbalances. Dr. Vita empowers women worldwide to take charge of their health so they can improve their fertility. She does this by showing women tools they can use to prepare themselves mentally, emotionally, and physically so they can improve their reproductive health. Her holistic approach to reproductive health focuses on the detoxifying of hormone disrupting chemicals combined with the consumption of nutritive foods and herbal remedies. Dr. Vita, we welcome you onto the Extraordinary Achievers Show.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. In our comment box, we are going to place a link of your book. Dr. Vita, you have just launched a book in a 60-second snapshot. Please tell us about how Women's Health Guide, 5 minutes a day to boost energy, balance hormones, and live a better life is all about.
Yes, I often have women come to me and ask me how they can improve their health. A lot of women come to me complaining of fatigue, complaining to me of irregular menstrual cycles, very, very difficult passage into menopause. So they have all of these issues, but they are struggling with time. They don't have a lot of time to research different therapies and to even attempt certain therapies. So I have come up with this guide, and it is a manual to help women only do 5 minutes a day of different activities that will help them boost their energy and balance their hormones. So it's for the busy mother, the busy student, the busy entrepreneur, to just grab that. And these are small things that you can do every single day to make a big difference in your life.
Thank you for that snapshot aerial view of what is packed in there. If you are watching this program, that was Dr. Vita, and in the comment box below, you will see the link to download her book, available on Kindle or as a paperback. Dr. Vita had an experience. She had her vaccination, and now we would like to ask Dr. Vita if she can share her experience after her vaccination. And after you share your experience of what happened after you were vaccinated, doctor, can you tell us what is your view and your take on being vaccinated?
Yes, I had a very, very traumatic experience as a healthcare worker and working at a medical center. I was one of the first in my area to get vaccinated. And so after vaccination, there was a holding room at the hospital where I was vaccinated, and they suggest that people wait about 15 minutes after the vaccination just to observe any after effects. And I stayed there for 15 minutes. Towards the end of my 15 minutes, I started to fan myself because I was hot. The woman next to me was also like, "Hey, isn't it very, very hot in this room?" And I agreed. I thought that maybe I was just hot. And as I was walking out of the door, I realized that the room was spinning. And so then I started to say, "I feel like I'm going to faint. I feel like I'm going to faint." And then some people came and then they held on to me. And then unfortunately, I passed out. I did faint. And so the paramedics came and they rushed me to the emergency room. My blood pressure was extremely low. And they were able to just monitor me for several hours. And I was extremely fatigued. I was hallucinating. I was out of my mind. I kept saying that there was something in my head. It was a very, very traumatic experience for me. This happened several months ago. We are now towards the end of April, and this happened in January. And since then, I have suffered from extreme fatigue. It's funny because at the time I was writing the book that I have launched this week. And so a lot of the things that are in there were tested for me to be able to sit here. I had to do a lot of the activities and the different things that I put in my book. And it has affected my ability to concentrate, my ability to focus. Since then, I have not been able to work an entire shift at my job. And it's brought on some headaches. The headaches are getting better now. But I did have a severe reaction, and now my life is getting back to normal. I'm starting to have more energy. I was able to start exercising this week. So life is getting back to normal. My take on it is, I think that for most people, and the data tells us that most people are able to get all of the COVID vaccines without a problem. Even the Johnson & Johnson vaccine that was recently paused for a small short period of time, the number of people that have blood clots or other adverse effects is very, very low. I do not know why I had such a reaction to this virus, but I am kind of a rare situation. I've talked to lots of physicians, and they are seeing some people coming in with some after symptoms, but they're very, very minor. So my advice to other people is not to take my experience as their own. I'm one of millions of people that have been vaccinated, and most people have had no adverse effects.
So, Doctor, although you had what is a traumatic experience after the vaccine, you are still saying you're encouraging others to have the vaccine because not everyone is going to have the same experience. Is that correct?
That is correct. That is, everybody's genetic makeup is completely different. And I have never had this happen before with other vaccines, but for some odd reason, I had a bad reaction. It was not life-threatening at the time. Although my blood pressure did drop and my vitals were not okay, my life was not in any danger. And so I was not allowed to take the second vaccine, unfortunately, because that was my first one that I reacted to. But I'm one of very few.
Thank you. Dr. Vita, we thank you for sharing what you have been through and your take on the vaccine. We will be back with Dr. Vita shortly. In the meantime, we are going to acknowledge some of the comments that you have been sharing with us. Louisa says good evening and good evening to you, sweetie pie. And Glowmore says good evening and good evening to you. She says she's really enjoying the YouTube videos and we thank you for your support. And Simon C. Brown, good morning from Oxford. Good evening from London. Good evening, my dear friend. And T. Alabi says, really learning from this. Took my vaccine AZ and I think there's a next comment that goes with that one. And she says, and she's fine. Thank you. And Vonai, thank you for joining us, Coach. And she says, good evening and great conversation. Phil Richards said, there is a big percentage of non-believers to this vaccine. I really can't see how this is going to be turned around. Well, we are going to explore that for ourselves today. Michelle West, hey, honey, and hello to you. And Patrick T says, the Tuskegee syphilis experiment is one of the most disgusting, racist, and under-discussed examples in recent medical history. Fair play to Julia for saying that. That was Juliana. Juliana, your comment has been acknowledged. And Ruvarasha says, yay, Dr. Vita. She's rooting for you, doctor. And thank you for joining us today. And Bangi says, hello, Dr. Vita. And Bangi says, you're doing a great job, Dr. Vita. Keep the good work going. And remember to follow that link to her book that has been placed in the comment box. Monty says, is there a difference between the Black people and the white with the vaccine? I think that is a question that we can take to one of our panelists. Oscar Bing Pong, hello. And she says, don't use my experience as a yardstick not to take the vaccine. Thank you, doctor. And whilst we've got Oscar Bing Pong on the screens, I have something here. This is a book by Oscar Bing Pong. It's Mindset Revolution. It's re-engineering your mind from prison to purpose. And this book here is packed with so much. A book by Oscar Bing Pong. And also in our comment box, you will see the link of how to purchase this book on Amazon. Now, I received my book and I have been glued to reading this all weekend. So highly recommendable. A Mindset Revolution is re-engineering your mind from prison to purpose. It was actually the re-engineering your mind from prison to purpose that convinced me that I had to buy it. So besides that, he is a friend and a community advocate and leader. I have been really impressed with this book. I highly recommend it, and please do get your copy. A link will be placed in the comment box below. And thank you. Now we've got an experience. Is there a difference with the DNA of a Caucasian and the DNA of any other Professor Edward? We're going to ask you this question that came from Monty. If we can put back the question from Monty back onto our screens, and we're going to ask Professor Edward to answer this question for us. Is there a difference between Black people and white people with the vaccine? Monty asks.
Yeah, so that's a very important question. When vaccines are being developed or any new treatment, it is very important that the people who participate in the research are representative of the people who are going to receive it. What we have seen with the COVID-19 vaccine development is that it has been tested in many different people. So we had an active recruitment of these trials. Record numbers of people who participated in these trials across all the continents. Now, in terms of the DNA and the constitution of the human body, there is no difference on the main. However, there can be subtle differences in terms of the expression. So that's why some of us have got darker skin. That's why some of us are taller or shorter. And it's very important that we participate in these research trials so that some of those differences that account for both the visible issues such as skin color and the invisible things are tested out. So we are confident in this vaccine because the participation was cross ethnic groups, and trials were done in the States, here in the UK, South America, and also parts of Africa as well. So that again allows us to have to test out whether some people will have a different response to others. So the information we have on these vaccines tells us that there is no unique or different response that you might get by ethnicity. And thankfully, the study findings are being substantiated by what we are seeing in practice at the moment. So the protection that was seen in the trials is playing out regardless of ethnicity. The benefits of the vaccine are also playing out regardless, again, of ethnicity. So we have got no concern. And in fact, we need to be very careful with it, with the proposal that suggests that there are differences between blacks and whites, or between Black African and Chinese, because whilst that might sound like an easy, straightforward question, there has been historically some ethnic groups who put forward the view that they are superior because of their genetic makeup. So we really need to be very careful, and I can understand that is not the reason the question has been asked, but we also need to be very careful that it can open up a wide range of issues and even support people with supremacist views. So the straightforward answer is there is no difference. Yes, there are subtle differences, and that's why the participation in research trials should include people across the broad spectrum. We have a broader issue, and perhaps a subject for another day, which is the lack of representation in clinical trials amongst our populations, which then means that for some of the treatments, when they are being investigated, we cannot then rule out whether the same effect that is seen in those who have participated is going to be the same across the whole population if we don't have the same cross-section of that population represented in the trials. So I know that that's a different subject, but I think, again, a big plug there for if there are research trials going on, not just for COVID-19, but for all the other things, I would really encourage people to participate because, again, the safety is a priority when you participate in the trials. You're actively monitored, and actually then furthers the science in our ability to generalize on the findings from those trials. So I'll stop there for now, and happy to come back if there's follow-up questions.
Amazing. Thank you, Professor. And Monty, we hope that answers your question. And if you have another question for Professor Edward, he will be happy to address that further. We have got Juliana. Juliana has got something to add to the same question. So we welcome Juliana onto our screens. Juliana, please add your view to that.
Hi, thanks. So again, I think it's looking at the two different sides, the medical and science and the political element. If you're asking scientifically and medically, is there a difference? Then as Professor Edward has just said, no, there shouldn't be. There is an underrepresentation of those going through the clinical trials from the Black community, and there are some benefits that may happen if there were more. But if you look on the political side, you could say that, yes, there is a difference. And that's mainly based on socioeconomics. If you look at the OPV vaccination, which is the oral polio virus vaccination, the way it was implemented worked very well in Western societies than it did in Africa, where there's a lot of more remote areas and such. Within this country, if we come back to where we're at, what's not spoken about enough is that there is two different systems. There is a system for the poor and a system for the affluent. If those who can afford private healthcare and can afford to get into the system quickly, easier, and not necessarily cost-free, but a cost that they can afford, then they are able, and you could say more privileged, to access things quicker than others. It doesn't mean that there's a different vaccine for them and a vaccine for us, but it's a way that we interact with healthcare system across the mainstream NHS. We know about institutional racism. It's been around for a long time. When people speak about Black and white people being genetically different, then they also feed into institutional racism. This was used for decades to promote why we're different, why a certain race is more superior than another by genetical differences. That is not true and shouldn't exist. But when it comes to socioeconomics and class system and those who are poor and those who are more affluent, the healthcare system does interact with them very different based on the pathways and what they use.
There you have it, Monty. Juliana, thank you very much for expanding on in your response to Monty's question. We would like to welcome Professor Rotimi Ayodele Kayode Jaiyesimi back onto our screens.
Thank you.
Professor Rotimi, a 1978 graduate of the University of Ibadan, was appointed consultant in obstetrics and gynecology in the UK in 1994, the first Nigerian to be appointed. Professor Jaiyesimi is currently the Associate Medical Director for Patient Safety at Basildon University Hospital, Essex, and visiting professor at the Faculty of Law, University of Ibadan. He is a UK and National Health Service Patient Safety Specialist. He is a Senior Fellow of the Faculty of Medical Leadership and Management and a Fellow of the Institute of Information Management, a Fellow of the Western African College of Surgeons, and a Fellow of Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. He also holds a master's degree in business administration from the Newcastle Business School and a master's degree in medical law from Northumbria University in Newcastle. Professor is a transformation agent with a vast wealth of experience in clinical care, health policy, and global development. He co-authored Nigeria's national policy on gender and health and contributed to the Nigeria's national policy on diaspora matters. He has published over 60 scientific articles and presented at numerous international scientific conferences. The professor that we see on our screens is currently the chairman of the advisory board of the Nigerian Commission of the Global Eradication Program for Hepatitis and a member of the Diaspora Professional Plus Healthcare Initiative to reverse Nigeria's brain drain. As Chief Executive at Trojan Medical Group, he is currently undertaking healthcare infrastructure and development projects in Nigeria and offering telemedicine health services through QuickSpace. He is a multi-award winner and has been described by his peers in the United Kingdom as an asset in the UK National Health Service, NHS. Professor, we have a question for you that is coming up on the screens. And Glomore from the United States of America, this question is coming from, is asking this question: are we protected by the different vaccines that are there? Professor, would you like to answer that question for us?
Yes, by and large, thank you, Glo. By and large, most people mount an immune response when they receive the vaccination or the vaccine, whether it be the Pfizer one or the Moderna one or the Johnson & Johnson one. Yes, so most people do get an immune response, and they are protected by these vaccines. How long one gets this immunity for is still something we do not know, because we are probably just about 5 months into the use of the vaccination. But as more data comes in and scientists analyze this, we will be able to say how long the immunity will last for. If you look at the flu vaccine, we get the flu vaccine every year, and that's because the immunity wanes after 12 months. And again, another reason is because you have different mutant variants with the flu vaccine. And we've seen that happening with the COVID virus itself, with very new variants coming on. And with the existence of new variants, we may have to change tact. We may find out that we may need to have the vaccines every year or every 2 years. That information we do not know at the moment. One of the other things I'm going to say is that there are a number of people, very few, who will not mount an immune response when they get the vaccination. Because you hear people say, oh, I received the vaccine, and yet I still went on to contract the infection. That's perhaps because they haven't mounted an immune response. Dr. Edward, Professor Edward, alluded to the idiosyncrasies we have in drug reaction or in handling drugs. And this may be one of it, where different individuals may react or respond differently to what majority of people will do. But these numbers are very few. So the short answer to Glo's question, I think the question she said was, how long does the immunity last for? We do not know at the moment, but as time goes by, the more we use it, the more we analyze the data, the more research we carry out, we will be able to come up with answers maybe by this time next year. But for now, what we do know is that the very first vaccine does confer a degree of immunity for most people. The reaction Dr. Khaki had is quite unusual. Sorry to hear about it, and I do hope you feel better. And I'm happy you did stress the fact that even in spite of that, you would recommend the use of the vaccine, because we know that it protects. We know that getting COVID disease is more serious than the very few people who have had the vaccine. And I know perhaps later on, which I wouldn't go into now, but I'm sure we will probably talk about long COVID, because that is an issue that we're having to grapple with at the moment. Long COVID, the mental health issues. So I will leave that for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Just to clarify, at the moment, we don't know whether they are going to, whether the COVID vaccinations are going to mirror flu jabs. Is that correct? We don't know if this is going to become a yearly vaccination or 2-yearly vaccination. That is not known as yet.
Yeah, that's correct, yes.
Okay.
Let me give you the example of the yellow fever vaccine. The yellow fever vaccine is a vaccine, and you only get it every 10 years. And that's because the immunity lasts that long. The flu vaccine, you have variants coming in every year, and that's why we receive the flu vaccine, especially the vulnerable people, every 12 months. But the vaccine, COVID vaccine, came in December, early January. I mean, late December, early January. So it's still very early days. So we don't have that data as to how long the immunity will last for.
Thank you for answering that question, Professor. And we will be back with you shortly. We would like to welcome back Dr. Vita Khaki. Dr. Vita Khaki, our next question to you is, how important do you consider COVID passports to be?
COVID hotspots?
Passports. Do we all need to have a passport to say we have been COVID vaccinated? Are they very important? Or in your view, do we all need them?
Yes, I believe that we all need them. Here in the United States, they have lifted a lot of regulations in terms of mask wearing. So you can be in a public space without a mask on if you've been fully vaccinated. But for example, I was at the gym today, and the gym that I go to, it's a small room. And so you're with everyone that's breathing heavily, and some people are not wearing masks. And so I would feel more comfortable as someone that's only gotten one vaccine if everyone produced their mask, if everyone produced their COVID passport, so that we can know if a person's been fully vaccinated. Guaranteed, of course, Professor Rotimi did mention that just because you have been immunized, just because you've received the vaccine doesn't mean that you're completely immune. But I think it's important whenever we have indoor gatherings with large amounts of people for people to present their COVID passports if they want to go and be in that particular event without a mask on. So I'm saying yes, 100%. People should present their COVID passports.
Thank you, Doctor. So Doctor says, yes, COVID passports were great. For some of us, we want to return back to the wine bars, and we would like to have others that have got their COVID passports to know that we are all drinking safely and we're all eating safely. Let's take the view from Juliana. Juliana, in your view, do we need COVID passports? Should COVID passports be compulsory?
It's an interesting discussion. I guess the nature of this pandemic is such that your personal choice affects the public. For instance, if you say, I'm not going to take the vaccine, but I want to work in this specific industry, then you have to acknowledge that you're then putting other people at harm because of the way it works. So it's interesting. There's other things to consider regarding vaccination for your children, for them to attend certain schools. Are you going to vaccinate your child so they could attend the school, but not vaccinate yourself because of the morals or understanding you have around the vaccination? In areas such as London, which is highly concentrated, and if you want to do anything fun, there has to be 100 other people around you, that they may start to look at vaccination passports to utilize these social activities and such. And so this is within our own country before you even think of traveling. I know that Afro Nation, which is a big festival, was in Ghana a few years ago, and everyone rushed to get yellow fever vaccination without understanding it, without knowing what yellow fever was, just so they could go to the party. So there will be people who will get the vaccine to get the passport so that they can continue to live their life in the way that translates as freedom to them. But there will be people who will start to restrict what they do because they're very much against the passport. So I'd say it gives a sense of confidence and security to those who have had the vaccine and want to be in an environment with others who are also vaccinated against it. But again, it's going to take some time to understand how long you're protected from it and what that actually means long term. So I think you could be here or there with it, but depending on what people want to do with their lives, they will go and get the vaccine if they really want to travel somewhere or they really want their child to go to a specific school. Sometimes we do things not for us, but for the people around us.
Thank you. And that is a great way of putting it. As you just said, if there's a big festival and everyone wants to go to it, everyone will be queuing to get their vaccination. Thank you for that comment. We had a comment that hadn't made me chuckle, and it comes from Monty. And Monty says, it's blackmail to have a passport. Monty, I think it's a bit of a control to have a passport controlling the situation. Professor Edward, please, what is your take on the COVID passports?
Yeah, thank you. So I think the issue around passports and how you reach that position is a contentious public health, human rights, legal issue, because fundamental to that is mandatory vaccinations. And I would hope that we get to a point where the uptake for the vaccinations is high because people have had their concerns addressed, and whatever it is that they're worried about, they've had an opportunity to discuss it. And that's why events like today are very, very important, because it's an opportunity for people to raise their concerns, hopefully get the reassurance, and then they move from hesitancy to acceptance of, or to being more confident of the vaccine, and then subsequently to acceptance. So I think that's the first point that I would make. However, having said that, I think we need to really understand the benefits from vaccinations and also why vaccinations play a big role in the restoration of services and us getting out of this miserable situation. So vaccinations, in this case, the COVID-19, has got a different layer of benefits. So they benefit the person who has been vaccinated. We know that. We only have to look at the data that came out 2 months ago from Israel, who had a massive vaccination campaign. We know from data from Scotland, a paper that was recently published, which showed the impact of vaccinations in reducing severity of disease, the number of people admitted, and subsequently the number of deaths. So we know that vaccines do benefit the individual who is vaccinated. But we also know that vaccines, there is emerging evidence on the impact of vaccinations on onward transmission of infection. So we now know that being vaccinated also protects the people who are around you. So that is the wider community benefit. And with international travel, we now know that moving from one area to another can actually increase the risk. I mean, this is a viral infection that started in Wuhan in China. Some of us didn't even know where Wuhan was up until 12 to 18 months ago. And so that's why it's very important that we do all that we can to prevent the onward transmission through global travel. And we know that that is in line with things we have already done before, the yellow fever, hepatitis A, meningitis vaccinations that are in place and are a requirement for international travel. Then the third benefit from vaccines is more to do with how your health system can be restored and get back to normality. So at the moment, we know, thankfully, certainly here in the UK, the number of cases has come significantly down. And that means that the planned operations for your hip operation, for your knee, we were talking previously around some of the women's health issues. We know that there will be ladies who are waiting for surgery who could not be operated on because basically we turned our health centers into COVID-19 centers. And sadly, we are seeing the situation unravel in India. We have seen the same in Brazil. And so if we don't get sufficient enough protection, then it means that even if you are not and you are anti-COVID-19 vaccinations, God forbid, but if you have a non-COVID infection or a non-COVID health need, then you could be turned away because your hospital is dealing with COVID-19 cases. So that is a secondary benefit in terms of releasing your healthcare system so that we can start operating on those people whose care has been delayed, who are still in pain and in suffering. And then the last thing is about the economic recovery. So we know that livelihoods have been significantly affected by the lockdown measures. Necessary, yes, but actually the longer we prolong this, the more lives are going to be damaged, not necessarily from COVID-19, but from the economic impacts. So I think we need to get to a point where people understand the benefits of vaccinations and hopefully not have to rely on a mandatory or what others have called blackmailing people into getting vaccinated, and that it is actually a free will with informed consent, and we demystify some of the things coming out of WhatsApp, YouTube, great platforms, I must hasten to add, but are being misused by some people to propagate an agenda that is against the vaccinations.
I totally agree with you, Professor. However, we are going to get the comments of how can it be of free will if they're not allowed to enter a restaurant or board a flight without a COVID passport. And there is going to come the question and comments from others. We appreciate you for that. Professor Rotimi, what is your take on the COVID passports, please?
Yes, I'm going to try and give it a humanistic view. And again, about communication. When you use the word passport, it's as if you have to show it to travel. If you use the word certificate, it carries a lesser connotation. One of the things we should understand is that virtually everybody in the United Kingdom, born in the United Kingdom, has got a vaccine passport, if you want to call it that, or vaccine certificate. Because right from childhood, you get your diphtheria, typhoid, and polio vaccine, you get your tuberculosis, BCG vaccine. And when you get those vaccines, it is documented somewhere, and you carry this with you. When you look at some professions, especially the medical profession, you cannot go into nursing school or into medical school if you haven't been vaccinated against hepatitis B. And this is to prevent the individual, the potential healthcare professional, who may or may not carry the infection, transmitting it to their patients. So one has got to look at the public interest against the individual interest. Now, traveling to other countries on holidays is not a human rights issue. It's a choice issue. So if, for example, Australia decides to say you cannot come into a country without evidence of being vaccinated, then they're not impinging on your human rights. It's a public health issue, and that outweighs the individual rights. So what I'm going to say is this. I have my vaccine passport going back to childhood. And I know that when I was in medical school, I had so many vaccines. And I've had my 2 jabs of the COVID vaccination. And I was issued with a certificate. It wasn't called a passport. And as Juliana alluded to, the yellow fever, there's something it's a yellow card. It's called the International Travel Certificate. And within it, it's not just yellow fever, it's got smallpox, it's got typhoid. So vaccine certificates or vaccine passports is not a new thing. And I would encourage people that if we want to free ourselves and go back to some normality, then it is important that you show the evidence that you've been vaccinated. You will notice that during my initial talk, I said that some people mount immunity, some don't. You might ask me the question, how would I know whether I'm immune or not? I'm sure there will come a time, well, it's available now, quantitative antibody tests, where that might be an issue that we'll have to do. Check the antibody levels, and if it's gone down, maybe you get a booster dose. We do get booster doses for many other vaccines. So having a vaccine passport or asking is not a blackmail. It's just to show that you've protected yourself, and in doing so, you've also potentially protected your loved ones and the wider public community. Thank you.
Professor Rotimi, thank you for that, and we appreciate it. We appreciate our panel today and covering a topic that is on the tip of our tongues every single day, because this has become our new norm. We are going to take a moment to step away and just indulge in something different. In my hands, this is Jack Royale seasoning. This is the original flavor. And from the original flavor, they have the mango and honey flavor. And they also have another mango flavor on its own. Now, Jack Royale, whose link will be put into our comment boxes, is locally homemade by Sean and his team. You can follow them on Instagram. They're on all social media platforms. Their website will take you to subscribe so you can hear all about the offers. Last night in this household, we took the original and we took the mango and honey. We cut up some onions and tomatoes. We smoothed all this into the chicken and we put it in the oven, and it was absolutely scrumptious. And I'd like to encourage you that if you have a business or you have something that you'd like others to know, simply send us an email, get in touch, send us a message on one of our Instagram, Facebook pages, anywhere, and just say, the Extraordinary Achievers, could you please share something that I'm doing? And we are more than happy to share anything with others that you have. And please do take time to have a look at this video. That was just taking us on a passport to Jack Royale Jack seasoning, and for us just to delight in tantalizing our taste buds as we purchase one of those. And it is money well spent. We would now like to go to some comments. Anthony says, awesome show. And Anthony Everest, we love you. And thank you for the millions of shares you do every week. We truly appreciate it. Monty says, I'm against the vaccine so early. It's not fully tested as yet. I'm sure one of our professors will be able to acknowledge that comment, Monty. Podcaster Norma says, but yellow fever and other vaccine has been making a difference from the COVID vaccine and being tested on a longer period than this. And I think that is a question. I think Professor Rotimi did say that, and Professor Edward, that it was the funds and the money that went into it. But however, it is clearly still something that we need to be convinced of, that it has come out so quickly, because this is the first vaccine, however, that has been turned around in a very short time span. And Claudette says, I don't get the issue about the passports, as it's the person who hasn't had the vaccine who's more at risk than the person who has had it. And once again, we ask our professors to take note on those comments. Chief David Ijabana, thank you for joining us today. And Chief David says, the COVID-19, it is better to wear a bulletproof vest to a war zone than to go without one. That's how I conceive taking the vaccine. It's not a cure, but it reduces the chances of a fatality. We thank you for your comment. Patrick says, if you want to go to the festivals or travel, you may need a COVID passport. If you don't want one, don't get one. But don't be a little crybaby if you then go to do things you knew you needed a passport for and you're not allowed to do them. We hear that, Patrick. Anthony Everest says, I'd rather not infect myself with the mess till I have the whole facts. Esquire Charles Lawson says, I've had mine first dose in February and I reacted to it seriously. I was seriously feverish with aches and pains for about 4 to 5 days. Lady Yemi, people and places. Hey, sis. She says, wonderful discussion, much needed information. Thank you. Chief David says, I suppose the vaccine passport simply as a form of assurance to know that people around you have been vaccinated and chances of community transmission is reduced. Esquire Charles Lawson. And once again, let me take this moment to remind you that if you are feeling peckish or if you are starving, FC Restaurant, which is next to New Crossgate Station, is where you will find Esquire Charles Lawson, and with his West African cuisine. And once again, I've tasted it and it is out of this world. Esquire Charles, thank you for supporting the program. And Esquire Charles Lawson says, but as we all know, different individuals react differently to the vaccines. And this is further on from the fact that he reacted to the vaccination himself. HRH, Princess Olutoyin says, this is a total control of human life. And I'm sure she's referring to the COVID passport of vaccinations. And Norma says, and all those vaccine in the past was tested over a period and made different from this COVID vaccine. And Vicky Segavi says, NHS a number, just be a digital passport. Patrick T says, where do the guests think the misinformation and scam mongering on social media is coming from? Do you think it's people misinterpreting things, or is there a more sinister motivation? And once again, that question there, Juliana and Dr. Vita Khaki, could you please take note of that? Where do the guests think the misinformation and scaremongering on social media is coming from? Is there something sinister going on? We would like you to address that when you now come back onto our screens. Noma says, not everybody should be made to take the experiment vaccine all at once, so we can really see how this experiment is working with or without the vaccine. And I would look at it in the other way too, that we've had a gradual of the over 70s, over 80s first, and then over 60s, and then over 50s and over 40s, and not everyone has taken that vaccine. So it would be great to hear how the statistics are standing on the results and the research. I'm sure the professors will take a look at that and advise us further. And Monty says, great show, and we love you, Monty. Vicky says, great show, and we love you, Vicky. Angela says, great show and very informative. Thank you and appreciate it. And Angela, we love you. Pastor Dr. Kingsley, a doctor himself, says, more grace in Jesus' name. And thank you, doctor. And Raham says, it's an awesome show, and we thank you for tuning in. And K Collar says, thank you for this show, and thank you for joining us. We thank you for all your comments. We thank you for sharing today's program. We thank you for tuning in every Wednesday at 8 p.m. We thank you for connecting with us on Instagram, on Facebook, on YouTube, on LinkedIn, on Twitter. We thank you for staying connected, and we thank you for supporting the show. It really means a lot to us that you support us. And that's why we also ask, if you've got anything you want us to discuss, if there's anything you want us to share with the wider community, please do share it with us. Sarah Kenny says, good evening, everyone, and good evening to you, Febanani. What does it mean when you have low blood plates? I've heard is common with the vaccines, and I have a low ICG levels. Will this affect me? And Professor Rotimi, we are going to bring you back on to answer this question for Sarah. And Sarah asks the question, how does the low plates pallets affect her, the blood pallets affect her?
Yes, a few cases of low platelets are resulting in blood clots have been recorded with the use of the AstraZeneca as well as the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. How it occurs, we do not know, because platelets are supposed to make your blood clot. But in this particular instance, what we found out is, yes, the people develop low platelets and go on to develop blood clots. It's not a common thing as has been alluded to. It's very rare. About 1 in 250,000 people will have this issue. And with any drug, even with paracetamol, even with water, you do have this adverse side effects. And that's not to say you cannot use it. If we look at the very fact that I think over 300 million, if not 500 million people have been vaccinated, and we're talking of maybe about 80 to 100 people who have developed this low platelet and blood clots. The numbers are very small, and it is a very, very rare condition or association. The risk of dying from COVID is far greater than the risk of this blood clot problem. And one thing I would also say is this particular phenomenon, which we are still exploring, that is the blood clots, is also reported with the use of heparin. Heparin is a drug we give to people to thin the blood. People who are at risk of thrombosis, people who are pregnant and have other comorbidities. It may surprise you to know that heparin as well causes this same low platelets and blood clots in a very few number of people. And yet we haven't screamed loud saying, oh, heparin is bad, stop it, and stuff like that. There's no drug that hasn't got potential serious adverse effects. And this is one of them. We cannot hide from them. But the numbers are small. It is very, very rare. And this is why people are told, if you have any reaction, if you feel unwell, please report back to the hospital. And I'm sure prompt treatment can prevent any disastrous effects. I think one of the other questions that was talked about was that why should those who have been vaccinated carry the passport and not those who haven't been vaccinated? I mean, if you've been vaccinated, it's not written anywhere that you've been vaccinated. So the only way you can show that you've been vaccinated is to have some documentation. That's to answer that question. And I think people are worried about that this is an experiment or that it's new. Every new drug in the market is new. It's not an experiment. The experimental stage are the clinical trials. They would not have approved it if it's still an experiment. I will remind ourselves of the effect of the vaccine against the human papilloma virus. That's the virus that causes cervical cancer. And we do know that cervical cancer, untreated, kills a lot of women. But medicine was able, or the scientists were able to develop a vaccine against the virus. And when it was introduced and given to adolescent children, girls and boys aged 12, 13, there were no issues about it, that why are we giving them these vaccines? It was to protect them from the virus so they are not at risk of getting cervical cancer, which we know can kill. So the use of the COVID vaccine is not an experiment. It's a form of public health measure to stem this pandemic, and that is what it is. I hope I've thrown some light onto the issues raised.
Thank you, Professor. And Sarah Kenny, we hope that that has answered your question. And if it hasn't, please do put a next question in the comment box below. And if you can please address it again to Professor Rotimi. We have a question for you, Professor Edward, and it's coming from Caller. Caller has a question, and we are going to have Caller's question next for Professor Edward. Professor Edward, we welcome you back onto our screens. Professor, what are the common allergic reactions associated with the COVID vaccine? Caller asks. Professor Edward?
Thank you, caller, for that question. I think it's a very important question. So I think we need to distinguish between what are the common side effects and what are the common allergic reactions. So allergic reactions are extremely rare, but they do happen. And one of my colleagues, Dr. Vita, did describe the unfortunate allergic reaction that she had, and that is well documented in terms of some of those reactions. So the allergic reaction of concern will be something similar, which is an anaphylactic shock, which is your body responds differently to any part of the vaccine to the point that you actually need resuscitation. And again, Dr. Vita gave her testimony, and we thank God that she pulled through that. But that is rare. But if we're talking about common side effects, again, that is different from allergic reactions. Now, one of the issues that we tend to have with vaccines, and not just limited to this one, is sometimes in the preparation of the vaccine, there might be some egg products that have been utilized, and people with egg allergies sometimes can be exempted or be given an alternative vaccine. There are some people who can be allergic to nuts, and again, they can be exempt. But what we know is for the vaccines currently licensed and being utilized, they do not contain any egg products, and they also do not contain any nut products. And then there are some people who have concerns from a religious point of view or from a diet point of view around the use of animal products. So some people might say, I am vegan and I hold that very high in terms of my values. Again, there were no animal products within that. So I think we need to distinguish between allergic reactions and side effects. Now, on the side effects side, the very common side effects. So for any medication, whether it's paracetamol or any of the drugs that people might be taking, if you read the leaflet that comes in that box, it will tell you 3 categories of side effects. It will tell you the very common side effects, and it will tell you that this happens in 1 in every 10 people. Then it will tell you about the rare side effects, and it might say happens in 1 in 1,000 people. And then it will have rare side effects, which might be 1 in more than 10,000, and then extremely rare side effects, which are in more than 1 in 1,000,000 people. And so again, the same classification has been used for the COVID-19 vaccines. So the very common side effects are things like having a heavy arm afterwards. So injection site pain, that's not just unique to this vaccine. Feeling a bit feverish, because let's remember, your body is mounting a response, and we all respond very differently. I think there was a comment earlier on to that effect. So those are common side effects. 1 in every 10 people will describe an element of that. And if you look at the statistics, it will tell you kind of shoulder pain or arm pain is a little bit higher in a number of people. Fever will be the other one. But then you then get to the extremely rare side effects. And my colleague, Prof. Rotimi, has already talked about the blood clots as an extremely rare side effect. And actually, it is in more than 1 in every 1 million people that we have seen. And we have seen that with the Johnson & Johnson. We have seen that with the Oxford AstraZeneca. Now, the way the media has been reporting this has not helped the situation. And to an extent, it causes people to worry and to panic. For the majority of people in the UK, I was looking up the figures just before this show, 47 million people have received at least 1 dose. And then you've got quite a high number, 19.8% of our population has now received the 2 doses. Now, the fact that we don't have, in this day and age, things like Sky News that will give you information, Sky News commitment is that they can get to anywhere in the UK within 30 minutes. I'm sure if some of those things were common side effects, we would have seen them being reported. Over and above that, we've got schemes that, such as the yellow card scheme, which helps us to track and to report those symptoms. And the fact that these extremely rare side effects have been picked up and are investigated should give us reassurance that even the extremely rare side effects, when they are reported, then the system stops until we can clarify whether that is dangerous or not. And we have seen a number of regulators, the European Regulatory Authority, and here in the UK coming back and saying, well, actually, the benefits outweigh the risk. So there are other things that have got higher side effects. COVID-19 itself has got 16 times greater risk of causing blood clots after you've been infected than the vaccine. We know that the risk of developing a clot when you are on the pill is 1 in 1,000 women. We know that the risk of developing a clot when you're having major surgery is almost 1 in 2 in some cases. Do we stop taking those? No, we do risk assessments and we do risk mitigation. The risk of even flying a long haul flight, so I'm from Zimbabwe, to get home, it will take me 10 hours. The risk of me developing blood clots is 1 in 500. Do I stop flying back home? No, I do the risk benefit assessment and I put mitigation measures in place. So that's where the risk perception needs to be within a context. And sadly, I know there was a question around the infodemic and where is it coming from. Sadly, sometimes people are presenting this information as though there is nothing else that we are doing that has got higher levels of risk. There are things that we do every day that carry a higher level of risk, but we don't stop doing them. We look at the benefits and we actually weigh that against the risks. So that's all I would say with regards to the allergic reaction versus side effects. They can be very common side effects, rare side effects, and extremely rare side effects. And what we are hearing a lot through the social media channels is people blowing up the extremely rare side effects as though they were very common side effects. We now know that the UK government is, and there's a very good infographic which I can circulate afterwards, which show the level of benefit against the risk. And so that's why in the UK, the regulator, the MHRA, has now made a decision that the risk of severe COVID infection when you're below the age of 30, compared to the risk of blood clots, again, when you're below that age, is high. And so the determination that has now been made is for your under 30s who have not yet been called for vaccination, when their turn comes, they will be offered an alternative vaccine. And that's the benefit of having a portfolio of vaccines, because if you find that there are some people who are responding adversely to the vaccine, you can give them an alternative. So I think people should understand that risk perception, that sometimes the risk is blown out of proportion, and yet there are other things that you're doing that are even higher risk. Alcohol has got a higher risk of blood clots. Smoking, 1 in every 2 people will die from smoking. 1 in 3 people, again, if they carry on smoking for the rest of their lives, will subsequently deteriorate to the point where blood clots become very common. And if you were to compare the risk, it pales into insignificance, the extremely rare side effects from blood clots, compared to some of the things that people do every single day without really stopping to think about it. So I'll pause there and come back later on. I know I've gone over, but I just thought it'd be useful to give people that context.
It was very much needed, Professor Edward. And I think you absolutely done it justice. It's just that in today's show, we have overrun because it has been so fulfilling to hear so much of the information that we have to share. I almost feel that we need a part 2 to it. We would like to bring back the question from Patrick on scaremongering, and we would like Dr. Vita Khaki, could you please acknowledge this question from Patrick from us? He says, where do the guests think this misinformation and scaremongering on social media is coming from? Do you think it's people misinterpreting things, or is there a more sinister motivation? Dr. Vita Khaki, what's your take on it?
I think influencers have a big role to play in this. And some of my colleagues have actually reached out to me wanting to make statements and encouraging people not to get the vaccine recently. A little bit of context, there have been some of the people that I work with, some people saying that the COVID vaccine is messing with their menstrual cycles. And so some of the big influencers in the menstrual cycle arena, just like me, have asked me to make comments on this. The problem is, just because you hear of 10 people or 20 people that are complaining about something, we have to really, number one, let's look at the data. So do we have any data that's out there? Have our governing authorities said that this is a problem? And so for my research, I have not seen any fertility issues that have been actually noted. I know a few people that are struggling to get pregnant since they got the vaccine, but we have to look at the facts. And so some influencers will get up there, and because they know 50, maybe even 100 people that have had a problem, then now they want to say that everyone will have that problem. So everyone needs to look at the facts, look at the numbers. And I think that's where a lot of the misinformation is coming from.
Thank you. Thank you, Doctor. Doctor, we're going to ask you to come back on our screens as when we just come back from Juliana to share anything you'd like to share with our viewers and audience today. Juliana, we would like to welcome you onto our screens and ask you the same question. That is from Patrick. Where is all this coming from? Scaremongering? Is it?
Some of it is from our own communities. I mean, when we look at the events that's gone on, that's in the press right now with the anti-masker protests, not everyone who's anti-mask is anti-vaccination. A lot of them are looking at different layers of this whole experience, and this initial having to wear a mask to go places is, for them, they feel it's infringing on their human rights, where there are others who don't feel like that. And we can't assume all anti-maskers are anti-vaccination. I've got a great quote, paraphrasing still, from James Baldwin in the 1970s to 1960s, is that when it comes to the system, we'd like to hope that us who work within the system are reasonable or can be reasoned with, but there are a huge group of people within our own community who've never benefited from the system. In fact, the system has always let them down. And we can't just go to them and say, because we are of the same community and I work for the system, this is what we're trying to do. Here, take it and do with it. That they would start to look at us as we are against them and we're no longer part of the community. There are people who don't benefit at all, or who perceive that they will not benefit from the vaccine. So in terms of don't benefit at all, I don't mean the vaccine. I mean, in general, over the history of healthcare, we can look at James Marion Sims, who did unethical experiments on Black women in gynecology. We may benefit from the technology and everything that's come out of research in gynecology now, but we were used as pawns to figure out what works and what doesn't work at those times. And again, it just goes back to education and understanding that there are a lot of people who don't believe in a system. A lot of people within our community who will start the scaremongering because they've read the past but don't fully understand the present or the future. We have more rights than we've ever had. And I'm not just saying as Black people, I'm saying as general people in this country who have the right to patient information leaflets, to understand the treatment before you get it and the consequences and benefits of it after. And so it's very much, when it comes to who's bringing out this information and where it's coming from, I can only say it's from the uneducated, or those who can't completely match the past to now, see the difference, see the transition, because genetic, all of this work, I'm not a doctor, I must say, but all of this work with genetics is over hundreds of years old. So nothing ever now, when we speak about vaccinations, nothing is ever starting from scratch. It's all starting from somewhere that's already been well established enough to eradicate a few other viruses in the past. So instead of taking it right to the beginning and reinventing the wheel, we need to understand what's already been done, what's being done now, and how does it affect us. But I do believe, I wouldn't say scaremongering, but people will read information, they would acknowledge the past and not see any change, because within their community, their immediate pockets, whether it's deprived or not, they have not necessarily benefited from the system that's there to protect them, to offer them healthcare, etc. And those are discussions that we need to have. For instance, before I worked in healthcare, I've only been in healthcare, I would like to say all my life, but truly 5 years and so. Before that, my work was health and social care, and I had a lot of focus on social care. And what I realized with working with youth offenders and such is, if you don't work in a system, you don't understand the system. But it's not just for those who choose that I want to do a degree in psychology, I want to study to be a doctor. that needs to understand healthcare. We need to learn to educate the health population, our community and such, but also start using language that they can understand. So then when there is change and something that benefits them, they know that it happened. Thank you.
Thank you, Juliana. Juliana, so we can put your website up. Your website is on our screens. Who needs to contact blackleaders.org.uk?
So we'd like any healthcare professional. We are called Black Leaders. We are Black Leaders in Healthcare because we are managed by Black Leaders in Healthcare. You do not need to be in healthcare to join our organization. It's all about leadership and promoting that. We wanted to be unapologetically Black leaders. No need to apologize that you're using this term because you've already been told that you're marginalized. We are not. When it comes to global health, we are not the minority. We are actually big playing partners in the game. And so my company is affiliated with the NHS Talent Board and Leadership Academy. And so we aim to support out of their 8 programs. I think only 2 of them are specifically for Black and Asian groups. And we want to expand that and have more diverse led projects that teach people leadership based on their cultural background as well. Because we've got a testimony from a man who said, when I came to this place, I didn't expect anyone to tell me this or that based on his background. And he's come in, and it's about understanding the current needs of our current society, regardless of your individual values. There's a shared value that we have across the whole program, which is reducing health inequalities. We are also, we will start having a radio show from next month, but we are also educating patient service users, those in the community who don't work in hospitals or health or social care. We will go through a lot of the elements and modules that they teach people before they go into the healthcare system so that you're well informed. We're also going to educate Black people on pathways, how to complain to hospitals, and how to pursue a role in supporting governing boards and such as a lay member.
Thank you. That was quite a lot that you managed to squeeze in that minute. We truly appreciate you. Thank you. Thank you so much. And over to Dr. Khaki, who we welcome onto our screens. And now, Dr. Khaki, please, what would you like to say? The floor is open to you for the next 60 seconds.
Yes, thank you for this opportunity. So it's been a pleasure being on this show. I always encourage people to look at the facts, look at the data. Here in the United States, we have the Center for Disease Control. So if someone says something on the internet about how COVID vaccine is messing with women's menstrual cycles, or that there are a lot of deaths due to the vaccine, I encourage you to just look up the statistics that whatever country you're in, that your governing board has put up. So that we can stop misinformation out on social media. Thank you very much for having me on the show, Lady Wynette.
Thank you, Doctor. And Doctor, who has to contact you, and what do people contact you for in your specialty?
I specialize in menstrual cycle issues. So if you have irregular periods, if you have any fertility issues, please contact me. If you have fibroids, I have programs where I shrink fibroids, and I work with people all over the world. I can order blood testing right to your door in multiple countries all over the world. So if you have any gynecological issues, any hormonal imbalances, then please contact me.
Thank you, Doctor. And Doctor, I know that you have been researching and working on so many other different things. You also have a current research going on. Can you just tell us a snapshot of your research that you have?
in addition to the millions of things that I do, I do work in a
Mhm.
laboratory. So I've been involved in women's hormonal health research, as well as cancer. I'm very interested in the cancers that affect women, breast cancer, any of the gynecological cancers, as well as liver cancer. Liver cancer is very, very important because a lot of the female sex hormones are synthesized and metabolized in the liver. And so I am very, very happy to say that in the recent months, we have submitted a patent in for an outstanding liver cancer drug. And so that's one big milestone that our group in our laboratory has had. And so me and two other people at UT Southwestern Medical Center here in Dallas, Texas, are just awaiting our approval for the patent.
Thank you for sharing that, Dr. Anne. We will be looking forward and looking out for your next launch. And thank you for taking time to be with us today. We are now going to go to Professor Rotimi. Professor Rotimi, thank you for your time today. We apologize to all our guests that this has been so exciting. So we have been super overrunning today, but we thank you so much because we've had so much to learn. And as I said earlier, I almost feel as if a part 2 was needed to this program. Professor, in a nutshell, in the next 60 seconds, what can you share with our viewers and our audience?
Time flies when you're having fun. It's been a good evening.
Absolutely.
I'm a gynecologist, but my regulatory body does not allow us to advertise our services. But what I do is to try and equip people with knowledge, more so in these times, so that they can make an informed decision. I don't think any one of us in the panel today is saying you must take the vaccine. What we are saying is listen to the facts. And I'll just say 2 things briefly, which we missed out. The effect of faith on the use of the vaccine. There's no theological tenets that says you cannot have the vaccine. The vaccine is not the mark of the beast. So just to round up, it's been a wonderful evening. And what I would say, saving one life goes a long way. An empty seat in the family is devastating. And that is why we are appealing to the public that we have gone this far. Let us avail ourselves of this opportunity, this wonderful breakthrough, so that we can get back to normality. Thank you for having me on the program.
Thank you, Professor, and we thank you for your time. And we welcome Professor Edward. Professor Edward, thank you for all the information that you've shared with us today, your knowledge, your insight, your experience, the statistics, the research. We thank you so much. Professor, in 60 seconds, what's your message to our audience?
Yeah, so thanks for having me on the show. Again, it's been great exchanging ideas. We are not asking people to take up vaccines if they wish not to, but we are encouraging people to be consistent in their decision making. In all the other aspects of life, we go to the trusted source of the information, and vaccines shouldn't be any exception. I always give the analogy that if you boarded a plane or a bus and the driver or the captain says, look, I have learned flying planes on YouTube or on WhatsApp, sit down, relax, and enjoy your flight, I'm sure most of us would really jump out of that plane. So I would say the same way that we use for authenticating whatever information in other fields, use the same approach so that you find out for yourself authentic information and you use your knowledge of that to make your decision. Vaccines are safe. Vaccines save lives. And with the rate at which people are being vaccinated, the people who are not vaccinated will soon be in the minority. And sadly, in terms of the infection and the protection, sadly, those people won't be protected. I think the important point around the system and the historical arrangements, we can only get past that by getting as many of us working in that system so that people can see people who look like them being part of the decision-making process. So thank you very much. I've really enjoyed the evening, and I wish you well and stay safe because COVID is real.
Thank you, Professor. We thank you for joining us today. Next week, we will be discussing parental alienation, women in control of the media when it comes to rights where children are concerned. Parental alienation, women in control of the media when it comes to rights where children are concerned. We'll be exploring that topic next week, 8 p.m. Wednesday, and as always, we are live every Wednesday at 8 p.m. We would like to take this opportunity to welcome all our guests for today onto our screens. Professor Rotimi, we thank you for joining us today. And we thank you, Professor Edward, for joining us this evening. We thank you, Juliana, for joining us on this Extraordinary Achievers Show. And we would like to say thank you to Dr. Vita Khaki for joining us today and for sharing. And if you did not catch what Dr. Vita said earlier, she said she had the jab. She had a terrible reaction to it, but she says, please have your jab because she is in the minority. And she has got some wonderful things that she shared with us today. So please do go back and watch it from the beginning. We appreciate that today we have been overrunning because we had so much information. And like Professor Rotimi said, if you're having fun, time just flies by. So we would like to thank our guests for their patience and staying with us today. And we look forward to welcoming them again on the Extraordinary Achievers Show on another topic, on another subject. And if there's anything you would like to hear from them, their contact matrix will be on the comment boxes below where you'll be able to send them a message and be in touch with them. We would like to thank you from YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and from our website. We would like to take this opportunity to thank all the several admins of the several different Facebook pages that we also feature live. We would like to take this opportunity to thank all our team members from the Extraordinary Achievers team and to say thank you for being super amazing. For everyone that has shared on social media, virtual communication tools, I am grateful. We thank you. This show needs you, and we look forward to you joining us again 8 p.m. next week as we discuss parental alienation, women in control of the media when it comes to rights where children are concerned. Thank you for watching, and thank you to our panel, and good night.
Thank you for watching. You can now follow us on Facebook and subscribe our YouTube channel. Don't forget to like, share, and comment.